All right. Have you spent much time in Chicago, the city of Chicago?
I've been there 4 times.
Yeah. What are your takeaways from your Chicago? Is this a place where that you would move to? Do you like just to visit? A little fast for you?
It's way too big and fast for me.
Yeah.
Way too big. And in fact, I felt because I told you about the experience of going to Boys Town.
Oh yeah, we did talk about
it's a
that. I
different.
forgot. Yeah.
It's named a different neighborhood
So-called
now.
Boys Town. Yeah.
Right, but there was still always an element of kind of being on guard, kind of looking over my shoulder.
Sure.
I felt a little bit on edge.
That's interesting. I didn't feel this was my first time to Chicago last weekend. I didn't feel that feeling at all, thankfully, but I actually had no idea how city of a city Chicago was. I mean,
It's massive.
landing at O'Hare and getting on the train. I was supposed to go to a specific stop to meet Adrian, and I just got on the train. I know how to do that, and sitting there and looking at the map of the stops, and I was like, oh wow, my stop is like 15 stops away. So
Right.
I was like, wow. And then I learned that I'm just on one specific line, and there are of the L, I think they call it.
Yep.
Anyway, huge city. I wasn't expecting that, but I'm glad I went. Really incredible time. When I was on that subway, I was just looking around, and it's easy to remember what famous superstars or musicians or whoever are from Chicago because they have a billboard here or this foundation or that foundation. And I actually never realized that Common is from Chicago. I know that I shared some of his latest album, A Beautiful Riot. I think it's called
Beautiful Revolution.
Beautiful Revolution. You got the vinyl and all that. So he's an artist that is still around and doing his thing. Lots of really great guitar, music that I would classify as certainly being up to par with classical or anything else.
It seems like the people my age who were listening to him decades ago, it's like he's matured and advanced with us.
Yeah.
So it's
and there's some artists who aren't doing that, unfortunately. Some of my faves haven't really aged in the way that I would love. But
you can hear the history, but also speaking to the issues of the day, I think.
Yeah. Anyway, so being reminded that Common was from Chicago, is from Chicago, and seeing his philanthropic things everywhere on the billboards, I went back and just listened to some of his interviews. That's what I like to do with celebrities sometimes, just see what they were talking about during the pandemic or whatever. And I came across one of his Breakfast Club interviews, and for the downbeat, I want to share a bit of that this week. He's talking about being seen as one of the good guys or one of the black folks in the community that institutions can partner with and work with, and when it comes to the issue of being the good one of the good ones, the so-called good ones, he has a really good point. Let's listen to what he has to say.
They feel like they love me, or they like, oh man, Common is cool, or he a cool brother, like he a good, but I want them to feel that way about my friends from the South Side, or my friends from South Carolina, or my friends from New York. Like, and it's like, man, if you're gonna sit there and hold Steph Curry and LeBron, or and I love them brothers, then you got to respect hold the same value for George Floyd or for Philando Castile, or and Rakia Boyd and Sandra Bland.
I'm thinking about the famous, speech turned composition fanfare for the common man, I think it's interesting for them to have gone down that rabbit hole, and what I wanted to bring in, what it just inspired in me, Scott. I wonder if you think classical music, the institution of it, the industry of it, has a problem with just the everyday person, the so-called common woman or common man, especially those who are black or come from communities of color. We have seen how the classical industry can engage the most trained of us, or the most,
Right.
the ones with the most proximity or whatever. But is the concert hall anywhere close to being able to get folks who have nothing to do with the industry, who are from these communities of color, into the hall?
I think you have a better chance of getting them to tune into a classical station every once in a while than you do getting them into an orchestra hall, because there's
the time, the cost.
Exactly, but also the attire, what is expected of you to. I know that you've said that you're not going to do that. You don't wear church socks anymore, but not
Period.
not everybody's there. Not everybody's at that level yet.
Yeah.
But I think that we have trouble reaching the every person, the everyday person, no matter the color, just because of there's an elitist fog around it that you need to have some sort of an advanced degree to enjoy it or something like that, when really a lot of people just like it.
And an experience that I feel like a lot of the people at the heads of these classical institutions don't have is being in community with most folks who are from a different perspective or a different background. Specifically, I'm thinking about, again, when we went to Sphinx back in 2020, you are surrounded by black and brown folk who, come with the same mission and have the same understanding of where the industry needs to go. So there's just a level of the conversation that doesn't exist in other spaces because of that. I wonder if you have any striking memories or just anything you learned from having the privilege of getting that perspective, that perspective that just does not exist in most, maybe none of the classical institutions.
When I walked away to get drinks for the group that we were talking with, and you said that they leaned over and said, "All right, what's up with this white dude?" That was the first experience for that.
Okay.
But also, let me give you an example of, it's one thing to listen to your person of color friend tell a story about an issue that they face, and you go, okay, I believe you. I understand that happens. I'm sorry that happens. But then to hear that same story from everyone in the room.
Yeah.
And the example that I'll give is, you've often talked about how you feel like you have to do 110%, 120% because of the color of your skin. That you have to do something extra. I heard a story about that in plain talk from virtually everyone standing around me at one point in time or another. So that just became crystal clear.
It reminds me of when the Me Too movement came to a head a few years ago. This was even before I moved to Minnesota, but I remember getting on Facebook and every woman on my feed just had something to say, some experience. I mean, and that was one of my big awakenings as, a same gender loving person. I just don't have the context for sexuality as it applies to women. So like just reading that just was a big shock to me, because so many of those things I've just never had proximity to. So, it's just so important to have that real dialogue and to really unlock those real conversations in spaces where the majority experience is different from and now it's easy, very, very easy to weaponize or be a harmful presence in those spaces if you don't come to it with a spirit of respect and humility and just listening. If I'm going watching a panel about women in music, for example, that is not my opportunity to walk up to the mic and showboat or do whatever, or most importantly ask the question, oh, what can I do? I hope we've learned that is not one of the panel questions you need to ask as we begin to come back to real life with these conferences. Anyway, and overall just acknowledging the privilege of being able to do that. If any of us have the opportunity to really get that perspective, that real perspective from communities that we're trying to engage and include in our work, it's something really important. So my very long way of saying shout out to Common, the city of Chicago, all of the folks with a little bit of money doing philanthropic things there and trying to change the arts and everything else around it, just like we are here. Let's get into it. I'm Garrett McQueen.
I'm Scott Blankenship.
And this It's Triloquy, Opus 120. Thank you very much for being here. Returning listeners, thank you for returning and keeping this podcast and this project something that is very relevant and a huge part of the arts ecosystem. Thank you so much for supporting this project and helping it grow week after week. To new listeners, thank you for being here with us. This podcast, it's a show that takes the phrase classical music, breaks down all of the status quos and the ideas around it, applies it to the real world in an essence in an effort to decolonize classical music. More information on the Triloquy podcast at triloquy.org. You can find past opuses and your way to donate there on the website. Scott, I was again, like I say every week, I think about that theme music and the vibe of it. Mm-hmm. When we get to the time to get the next theme, we have to think about the music we're going to want to walk up the steps to get our Emmy. So maybe something. So what is the vibe you want to,
I don't know, maybe ascending chords. Yeah.
We'll get there. We have to,
something majestic. It's got to be majestic.
Shout out. I want to do our little housekeeping here. Huge thanks and shout out to the Shuttleworth Foundation for their continued support of the Triloquy podcast. The Shuttleworth Foundation funds individuals who are unafraid to reimagine the world and the way we live in it. More information on them at shuttleworthfoundation.org. I want to thank Adrian Dunn and the Rise Orchestra for having me in Chicago. I'll talk a little bit more about it in this Opus. But again, really incredible time. Really love being in my element, similar to Sphinx, but I'll say in a more real way, in a more grassroots from the streets way. And and I think one without the constructs and the confines of the traditional orchestra concert. I mean, it's closer to a service. And Adrian is really good. He has a talent for really incorporating everyone in the space. So it's not people sitting down and being quiet and watching something. It's an experience, and it's where more concerts need to go. I think we're seeing a lot more of that in art spaces. In addition to thanking Adrian, I want to thank Sam Bergman and Outpost Minnesota for having me at the Hook and Ladder last night to do a little speaking and a little reading. And like the Rise Orchestra concert, the event that Sam Bergman hosted and put on, it was mixed format. So there was, actually a little musical theater. There was some great string quartets. That the show actually ended with a string quartet by Carlos Simon, who's been on the Triloquy podcast, and with lots of talking in between and audience engagement and just making sure folks are actually there and paying attention and having a good time. So I think in many ways we're seeing. I know I'm kind of putting the cart before the horse, but in many ways we're seeing the ways in which the live performance space is changing post-quarantine, and how there's more intentionality in just engaging the folks there and not just musicking at them or speaking at them, just really incorporating it. It's really incredible to see. So huge shout out and thanks to Adrian Dunn and Sam Bergman. But before we got into the first movement, I actually wanted to read a little bit of the James Baldwin that I shared at the Outpost event. So basically, there was a new string quartet performed, and to put some context around it, I read an excerpt from a short story by James Baldwin called Sonny's Blues. And even out of context, I think this part of the prose is really interesting to hear. So this is James Baldwin. He says, "All I know about music is that not many people ever really hear it. And even then, on the rare occasions when something opens within and the music enters, what we mainly hear or hear corroborated are personal, private, vanishing evocations. But the man who creates the music is hearing something else, is dealing with the roar rising from the void and imposing order on it as it hits the air. What is evoked in him then is of another order, more terrible because it has no words, and triumphant too for that same reason. And his triumph, when he triumphs, is ours." Think about that. I had never considered the idea that our reaction to a musical performance may have nothing to do with the spirit of the person who's sending out the music. You know, James Baldwin here again is saying that even in the moments when we actually do have a reaction to music, is our reaction and not our a communication between audience and musician. Anyway, going into the story, it basically flips that on its head and offers an example of when a listener actually does feel the spirit of the performer and how that can be such an incredible experience. But it just requires listening and listening on a really deep level, and that really touched me getting to present that, and I'm going to continue to think about it as we move forward in our work. So
Wesley Snipes in White Man Can't Jump said something similar. You know, he said, you listen to Gladys Knight and the Pips, but you don't hear them.
Yeah.
That's it.
I mean, Midnight Train to Georgia, I can barely play that tune because
Is that right?
I think about myself giving up and going back home. But anyway, this is not my therapy session. Movement 1. Okay, don't want to give up too much. We just started. All right, so in last week's triloquy and last week's fourth movement, we talked about a case of blackface in the classroom. Mm-hmm. Well, guess who had something to say? Guess what publication felt the need to respond and to let them know they will not be outwoked by these millennial and Generation Z students who have no idea what they're talking about? Guess who it was?
That's a pretty easy one. That's going to be Slip Disc. I didn't even think. It's good that you brought this in because I didn't even think to go over and look.
I wasn't looking for it. It made it across my timeline.
Okay.
Anyway, so just to catch folks up, a quick rewind last week. So at the University of Michigan, which we did not name last week, you know, the story was still kind of new, so I was being sensitive. But at the University of Michigan, in a class taught by composer Bright Shing, a so-called legendary performance of Othello was shown with Othello in complete and utter and racist blackface. There was huge backlash. I read in this article on Slip Disc that Bright Shing has actually stepped down from teaching that class, and the class is actually going to be split between two different teachers. So it was a thing, but some people think, and Bright Shing apologized and offered a statement. Well, some folks believe that he didn't have to apologize, that he did nothing wrong. I'm reading here from Slip Disc. The title is "A Composer Speaks Up in Defense of Embattled Bright Shing." Okay, the composer and conductor Kevin Scott is angry at the University of Michigan's handling of a student's protest against Bright Shing's use in a lecture of Laurence Olivier's film of Shakespeare's Othello. I'll read a little bit of the statement from Kevin Scott. He says, first, Bright Shing is one of today's finest living composers.
Name 3 pieces.
Look. It's so easy to jump to the defense of someone for the sake of some political idea or message, the way everything has become a little bit political in that way. Anyway, I remember meeting Bright back around 1987 at a Brooklyn Philharmonic family concert where he performed one of his compositions for solo piano.
Which was called?
He was very friendly and gregarious when we talked, and I had hoped to hear more of his music in the coming years, which I did. So first and foremost, we have a depiction of Bright Shing that's supposed to tell us, how could this person ever have the lack of vision to understand that this is something that's inappropriate, showing blackface? I think we tend to jump to the fact that people are just being nefarious and trying to cause problems. I think in the year of 2021, I want to be on the record as saying, in the year of 2021, if you are teaching at a school, especially at a school that has a reputation for excellence in a certain field like music, and at the University of, if you are in that position and you don't understand that blackface is a problem, that is a problem. Okay, I want to be on record saying that. With that being said, I don't think Kevin Scott is even allowing people to have the benefit of understanding, or having the example of maybe culturally he would not understand why this is a problem, but now he's learned something and he made a statement or whatever. Kevin Scott starts by, painting the picture. Oh, this is a brilliant musician. He was so nice and gregarious when he talked. I'm a black man. We had a great time. So how could this person possibly, be racist or have done something wrong? I think it's so easy for us to jump to the personal in that way when these sorts of things come up. Mm-hmm. I'll read a little bit more. In addition to coming to the defense of Bright Shing, unnecessarily so in my opinion, he wants to shit on the writer of that article that called out the issue, and one of the students that was in the class when it happened, Sammy Sussman. Kevin Scott says here, first, I never hear tell of Sammy Sussman either as a composer or journalist or performer. I will review his work after I finish writing this post, as well as read some of his writings. That said, this young man and his classmates cringed at seeing this classic film, which is heralded as one of the finest screen adaptations of Shakespeare's important classic, though I also hold Orson Welles' version, he's going into that. Now, to say that this film demeans blacks in any way is an outright joke unto itself. As mentioned, up until the last 3, possibly 4 decades, we have seen many actors, both leading and character, play roles outside of their birth race, So he goes on to say, the straights play gay characters, and you don't see people acting crazy, and and blah, blah, blah. I'm frustrated by this because I think it's so easy for folks in an older generation to brush off to the side something a younger person says, because how could you possibly know anything and X, Y, and Z, and you don't have the experience. I wanted to bring that point up specifically just to get your feedback or your thoughts. At 50, I think it's important for you to always have the perspective of younger folks. Is that something that you value at this point in your life?
Of course. But in this instance, you might remember last week I said I did not think that him losing his job was the answer. Mm-hmm. There should be a repercussion, but not a loss of a job, because you talk about being now in a position to do better.
Right. And I didn't say that he lost his job. I read that he's not teaching the class.
Right. So that's an important distinction. But that movie was made in what year?
80. What did he say? I'll find it. I'll find it in here, but go ahead.
I mean, that's an ancient film.
Yeah.
And we have grown since then. We have learned that this is not okay. So just because it's a heralded performance, there's loads of movies from my era that were heralded performances, and I look back on them now and I cringe.
Can you name some?
Pretty in Pink, 16 Candles, Weird Science.
Just listing them off.
Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
I know I saw that one recently, and I'm sure it was something racist in there, but I'm just not thinking of it right now.
Date Rape.
Sure. Oh, that's right. That's right.
Across the board. That was and we in the moment we went but that's not cool. And it's so, after a while you just realize that's not cool.
And the thing is, it's so easy for it to seem like or sound like someone of my generation is saying, "Okay, boomer," or "Shut up, boomer." No, it's not that. But I think there has to be this mutual understanding between generations that we all have something to learn from each other. But that includes the older generations to the younger. I'm getting to I was telling you before we cut on the mics, when I was in Chicago and, hanging out with folks in the orchestra, I'm getting to the point to where I'm not the youngest person or in the younger group in the room. So, I'm learning things from the 21 and 22 year olds, a lot of the slang maybe, or I guess really what I'm learning is that the inhibitions are really going away, and with that, the respectability is really going away. So the young musicians now, talk way more shit than I did when I was their age, because, and I think you can say the same thing for the older generation. Anyway, anyway, we can't, just dismiss. Kevin Scott can't dismiss what Sammy is saying just because he's this youngling that he's never heard of. That's not fair. That's not fair at all.
Just because somebody says you need to watch this, it's a classic performance. It got great reviews in 1945 or
right.
whatever. Well, it's offensive now. Mm-hmm. So.
And we're living in now. We're living in today. The last thing before we leave this that I wanted to mention, and I feel like this is one of the things that makes the Triloquy podcast. Listen, we have to be able to identify, and this is advanced in certain communities. We have to be able to identify when people of color, Black people, are being used for the sake of white supremacist structures. Okay? I'm not going to make any personal statement against Kevin Scott other than the fact that it was very strategic for this publication, Slip Disc, to have a Black man saying what he's saying. Now, tell me that I'm stretching. Tell me what do you think about that? What do you think about what I just said? That they strategically found the Black man.
You just said how sticky this is, and now you want me to get on the flypaper with you?
But the thing is, it's hard for me to sit here and say because folks are
and
so
it's
quiet.
That much harder for me to do it.
But folks are so quiet about that issue that when some of us do stand up and identify these things, we're wrong. We're ridiculous.
They do this. All you have to do is turn on whatever cable news channel you want to, and to prop up whatever point to prove that we're not supremacists, we're not racist, we're not bigots. They're going to find the one.
So look, listen,
tell me I'm wrong.
Allies, this is the challenge. This is the challenge. You have to be read. You have to understand and be in actual communication and fellowship with Black people, and not just your Black friend. See, that's the thing. That's the part right there. I feel like at this point, if you live in a city of more than a certain number, you probably have a friend of color if you're a white person. But how many people, and I'll put myself in this, how many of us really immerse ourselves or have been given access to communities where the predominant way of thinking or the predominant experience or perspective is not our own. I feel like if we have more of that, it's easier for folks to really see through the lines and how, race is mixed with white supremacy in these, so-called political conversations, and, just being able to openly and matter-of-factly name the fact that it's very strategic to have a Candace Owens on Fox News. It's very strategic to have, fill in the blank on this. And I see that here with this article. So take what you want from it. The other podcasts aren't going to talk about it. So, well, I'll just mention it here.
Yeah.
This gets a flat, by the way, obviously.
Sure.
To transition out of this accidental and get into the next, I wanted to highlight the University of Michigan Wind Ensemble. So like the North Texas Wind Ensemble, Michigan gives the world all of those band recordings. And it's it's so pivotal for folks who came up through band in college, even in high school, to be able to have those recordings. The New York Philharmonic is not going to record the wind ensemble pieces. We have to have these top level college ensembles, and the University of Michigan, without a doubt, is one of them. So we're going to listen to one of their performances here, since Kevin Scott is going to bat for blackface because of Shakespeare. We're going to listen to a little bit of a colonial song by Percy Granger. Let's take a listen. Really beautiful music, isn't it? Really soothing.
I feel swaddled.
Very, very, shores of some Gaelic beach. I think it's a prime example of how colonialism can come in the prettiest of packages, but underneath it all, colonial song.
Nice one.
how you would hesitate or have to figure out a way if you had to do a break on the radio about a piece called Colonial Song. How would you freak that? How would you spin that?
Well, I'm gonna have to spend some time with it. I can't just spit out gold here and right in front of you. I'd have to work on it.
Well, this is your warning, because you're gonna get that one playlist sheet where you weren't really paying attention to see Colonial Song.
Shit.
I can't wait. Anyway, okay, so my next, I have one more accidental before you get to yours. And this is getting us sharp for me. I was really excited to read this. I'm reading from the Philadelphia Inquirer headline, "Aspirational dressing is so last century. The Philadelphia Orchestra's new dress code proves it." A little bit from the article here. And I'm reading down here. Instead of the black tailcoat, white shirt, white piqué waistcoat, and white bow tie combo that for centuries was the epitome of high society menswear, the male players of the 2021 Orchestra Philadelphia Orchestra are pairing black suits with black shirts and a long black tie. The women's attire will remain unchanged from the current full-length black dress, skirt, or pants. So for folks who don't know, if you go to an orchestra concert, most orchestras, the men have been wearing, the Downton Abbey servant's costume. That's what I always called it.
Wow.
Is that not what it is?
That's
You
quite
love
good.
things that are English or whatever, so that's what they were wearing, wasn't
good.
it?
That's very good.
And I think that ties back to the idea of musicians being servants, being the help. We don't want to hear from you. Play your little fiddle and stay over there, and don't touch these hors d'oeuvres. Like that. The whole
Not even the photographer, not the photographer,
baggage.
nor the band gets to go through the buffet line.
But anyway, so that's just that bit of colonialism crossed the ocean into so-called American classical music, and that's what the men been wearing in these orchestras. I recently, I told you a couple weeks ago we were talking about the fall cleaning and getting rid of stuff.
Yep.
I got rid of my tailcoat and all that. Bye, goodbye.
And your church socks.
It went right back there in the dumpster. Anyway, so the Philadelphia Orchestra, in addition to a few others, let me find where it says that. I think it was San Francisco. It says here, this season the New York Philharmonic has switched to black collared shirts, jackets, and no tie for men. The San Francisco Symphony is also trying a new all black outfit, long black tie optional. So the Philadelphia Orchestra, in addition to a couple of other orchestras, are changing this and just putting everybody in all black. Again, as the article said, the women have always been in all black. Now it's the men as well. So what do you think? Do you think dressing the orchestra, so-called quote unquote, dressing the orchestra down, making them look more relaxed, specifically the men, do you think that will diminish pressure for audiences when it comes to dressing up, finding your pearls to go to the concert, whatever?
Let me tell you a story about attending a performance of the Omaha Symphony, guest conducted by Bobby McFerrin.
Okay. Do we need, is this something? Is this something dramatic? Go for it.
No, it's not. It's so not. He said, he turned around to the crowd and he said, "When you're listening to music at home, are you in a suit and dress shoes? No, you're there in your comfy pants and your hoodie and your slippers." So I had the librarian put the Scherzo from Beethoven's Ninth in the music stand, and he told everybody to take off your jackets, loosen your tie, kick off your shoes, and we're going to play the snot out of this music. And let me tell you, they played the snot out of that music cold. They didn't know that they were going to be playing that night.
And for folks who don't know, this is what Scott is talking about. Now listen to these triplets. So the strings have to have their listening ears on, because you're playing softly and separated staccato, so it has to be clean. Oh, and the winds, you have to count. You will get lost. Like, how a lot of times you can just feel the rhythm of the music. I know it very well. You're going to get lost.
And then I'll bang my head to this.
I'd have been pissed at him. No, especially if I'm playing contrabassoon.
They played the snot out of that.
Anyway, but what was the point of that? Like, just saying how being in the because we were talking about dress codes, right?
Yeah, his point was like, here you are, all pinched up in in a tie or a tight-fitting, tight around the neck blouse for the women, and you're in these uncomfortable shoes. How are you going to really play well if your body doesn't feel right?
Sure.
And I think that there's something to that. How are you going to listen to a 74-minute piece like Beethoven 9 if your shirt's
too tight? First of all, why would you? But go ahead.
And your drawers are all climbing up.
Look, I'm sure doing that, shout out to Thomas Wilkins, doing all of that helped the audience sort of lower their shoulders too, right? Mm-hmm. I'm sure that eased everything. So again, maybe this all black will, and it's not like all black is slumming it, And
I think that's gangster. That's tough.
And what I told you is, and we again, always a little dust in the corners, right? I think the next step, really, what does let me ask you this first before I get into my thing. What if it's just wear whatever, and we're not talking about extremes. No one is going to be wearing a thong, swimsuit, whatever on stage. But
that's always where they want to go,
right? But what if some people are just wearing jeans? It looks like a rehearsal. Like what if how they're dressed just looks like a rehearsal? Is that something that would diminish the experience or cheapen it? The music would be the same. The music might even be better to the point you were just making.
It wouldn't take me out of it. Not for me.
Not me neither. But I get it. It's all about perspective. The Gesamtkunstwerk. The music plus the scenery and how beautiful the orchestra looks. I think, even so, the next step is, the women wear whatever all black they want. It says full length, but, all black. Let the men wear, any sort of all black, because a lot of us, in addition to saying goodbye to the church socks, we have said goodbye to the tie as well. Sure. I don't want to wear a tie, especially after quarantine, and I'm trying to do decolonizer work. That's just not my vibe.
The last time
I'm just saying, maybe we can get to that even, just any sort of all black.
The last time I went to an orchestra performance, it's fun to put on something nice and look good to go and be seen a little bit. But that's the furthest that I went was a suit, dress shirt, but no tie, I got, I unbuttoned it enough to let a few chest hairs crawl out.
Sure. Yeah. Gotta, So
that's right.
So
got to do a little advertising.
So you've taken dates to the symphony. The symphony is like a date thing, or has been.
Yeah, on a few occasions, sure.
Mm-hmm. Were you successful? I'm just joking. This is not that type of. Were you successful in making sure that she had a great time and was taken home respectfully before 9 p.m.?
We heard the whole
before
concert.
The street lights came on.
And yep.
Anyway, shout out to the orchestras who are breaking that bit of tradition. I think it's big news. It would seem like, and maybe even at the end of the day, it is not a huge deal, especially maybe even a first world thing. They're changing their costumes, but I don't know. As someone who had to put on the piqué and the tailcoat and all that for years, I think this is huge. And I think it's one step against not only the formality of it all, but ungendering the performance space, because again, it was very men in the tailcoat, women in the all black. So now everyone's in the all black, and folks who don't abide by the binary, someone who is non-binary, trans, or whatever, they're not going to be singled out or weirded out or othered because of clothing or be pressured, because everybody's wearing the all black. So
I think all black's tight. I like to see it.
Right, and plus it looks really great. So we're going to transition into our final accidental with an orchestral arrangement of a tune that I discovered for myself late in life, but one that's really cool, one I know that Scott, and one that has been recorded really excellently by the London Symphony Orchestra, Painted Black by the Rolling Stones. regular rotation when I was at WUOT. I mean, for real, regular rotation. Well, what do you, again, having been there when the Stones were rolling, what do you think of that arrangement?
That kind of put me in the mind of maybe Alexander Borodin or maybe a Nikolai Rimsky-Korsakov.
Okay,
sort of
you're getting like steps of Central Asia mixed with
or a little bit of the snowball, the snowflakes. Rimsky-Korsakov had
the Snow Fairy or something
like that. Yeah, somebody's gonna flame me for that, but
anyway, we don't know everything.
That very ornamental sort of orchestration. It was good.
So one more accidental for this week. It's yours. What accidental are you giving it?
Well, I've got a mini accidental and a real accidental that I'm giving a sharp to both of them. I don't know if you heard or not, but the previous administration took some national monuments and shrunk them down. Bears Ears and Grand Staircase were shrunk to like 10% of its original size. And the Biden administration has put it back to where it was. I just wanted to give a quick shout out here that as he promised during his campaign, he restored Bears Ears and Grand Staircase national monuments to their original boundaries in a White House ceremony Friday, flanked by supporters, including Native American tribal leaders. It is their land. It should not have been. Yeah. So
in the first place,
right?
In the first place,
but that gets a sharp. And as we're recording on Indigenous Peoples Day, I wanted to point that out. Mm-hmm. And also, I sat on this article to save it for Indigenous Peoples Day because I found an article from Wisconsin Public Radio, Change in the Future of Music. Hip-hop artist is first Indigenous woman to judge the Grammys. A Chickasaw Nation member who goes by the stage name of J25 seeks to bring a new voice to the Recording Academy. Now, you want to talk about representation. Mm-hmm. This is an important piece because we're talking about how the awards get doled out.
Yeah,
and the article talks about how the nonprofit reported the 2021 Academy class is 48% female, 32% Black, 13% Latinx, 4% Asian or Pacific Islander. So we must be shaving decimal points to talk about J25 being an Indigenous person who's going to have a seat at the table for the Grammys. But this also, more importantly, kicked in the door for a subgenre of music that I was not aware of, and that is Indigenous hip-hop. Mm-hmm. I hadn't heard that this had been going on. And, obviously, some Indigenous actors and writers are having their day on streaming services. Reservation Dogs is doing really well and got renewed for a second season. But I've been listening to J25 here for the last couple days, and seeing as how Bears Ears has been returned back to its original size, a seat at the table with an Indigenous person at the Grammy panel. I wanted to listen to a little bit of J25 performing Land Back.
This one is for the culture. What we fighting for is bigger than what you think. It's time to speak up. Native Americans need to be heard. Land back. Yeah. Process of elimination, tried to destroy our culture, forced by assimilation. Still I ride for my natives without a hesitation. This for all of my cousins up on the reservations. Recognize when I'm speaking on don't get televised. Missing murdered Indigenous women. Genocide, losing all of our men and our children. Suicide, I'm pouring out my heart on these beats, trying to keep hope alive. Preach, I hope I'm not speaking too bold.
Pouring my heart out on these beats.
That beat goes. And
with that flute,
this is.
Are you telling me
this is a track? Hold on, cut it back up.
Study our traditions and follow the great spirit. They tried to take my freedom, but never could take my mind. Through the wars and the pipelines, my natives still survive. Land back.
There's a lot here, and there's a lot to talk about.
Listen to her,
because when she's talking about freedom and all of these different things, just the intersection of people of color, we use that word BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color, the intersections there and the joint struggle and how it can come out in music. One of the things you kind of pushed us here to the second movement officially, but just for me to offer a couple words. So, and I feel like I talked about this in one of the Triloquies a couple weeks ago, but I listened to a panel that featured an indigenous composer named Brent Michael Davids, and how he was talking about in most indigenous languages, there really isn't a word for music. The closest thing is like songing or music.
I remember that.
And it's the act of.
Right.
So I think, beyond just taking music, especially indigenous music, and putting it into genre or thinking about genre, I've grown to really watch these performances and think more about the purpose of the music making, the message that is going out, or the energy that is going out through the music, through whatever aesthetic of music it may be. But so when I listen to this to that track by J20, is it J25?
J25. Giselle.
Yeah, I've never heard this. It's
Sure.
incredible to learn this artist.
Giselle Child Evans is her name. She goes by the stage name J25.
That's awesome. Yeah. Happy Indigenous Peoples Day. This isn't coming out, on that. We're recording that now.
Right.
And we'll get into a little bit more of that in the Triloquy. But I think the idea, as we've talked about here on Triloquy before, the concept of land acknowledgements and what it would actually mean to give the land back, and more than just the acknowledgement. They're big conversations, and I'm really happy, at least from my perspective, to see these conversations grow and really be moved closer to the front. Growing up in Memphis, there is a preserved like village. I don't even know how it's called, but it's a Chucalissa Museum. It's like they have this little small village that I guess they found at one point after the extermination, by the West, and just preserved it just so we could get a peek. So beyond that, there wasn't really much conversation in the South about the indigenous experience in those conversations, because they had all been wiped out. But I mean, maybe that was different in Omaha with you growing up there.
No, it was just like everybody else. We got our units in school. Our art museum there has a pretty large collection of indigenous art, so it was around. But I've never heard an artist do it with hip hop, though.
Yeah.
Have you?
Yeah. No.
Did I answer your question?
I guess I brought up the musicking or songing,
right?
Because this isn't actually the first time I've heard indigenous hip hop, so that is something that I'm becoming more familiar with. But I'm gonna keep it real. That's the best I've heard. That one definitely wins. I'm gonna go back and put all of her music in my phone.
And
that's
also
some good stuff.
Yeah, also just the fact that we now have an indigenous person sitting at the table when it comes to the 2022 Grammy Awards, and it broke down what she was going to be, where she was going to be working. Yes, here it is. In categories including hip hop, pop, jazz, rock, reggaeton, and gospel.
Yeah, shout out to J25. Everybody go check out her music and support indigenous art. But we're now here in the second movement, where we're going to take the second ending. We take a piece of music that we've been listening to over and over the past week, and instead of repeating it fully, once again here, we talk a little bit about why we were so moved by it. I'll jump us off this week, Scott. So Dell and I, it's October, it's spooky season, so we've been going and watching some different things, Halloween episodes of our favorite shows, the movies, and especially leaning toward things that I had never seen before. There's a lot I missed. And one of those things, one of those classic scary films, is 28 Days Later. You've seen that one, right?
Yeah.
Well, I had never watched it. I was so intrigued by 28 Days Later. We just press play right after that on 28 Weeks Later, but throughout both of the movies, you have this music by composer John Murphy that I really appreciated hearing. So when we think about, at least when I think about the zombie movies that I've been familiar with, the musical aesthetic has been kind of fast-paced, sort of panicky, oh my gosh, we have to run, we have to hide, which, when you're talking about zombie movies is, appropriate enough, I would say. But John Murphy took a different approach. So when people are hiding or rummaging for food or even running from zombies, you have this persistent, almost soft, maybe even menacing music that's going on. It's not the heavy, loud, oh my gosh feel.
It ratchets up tension.
It's the more tense, but also I think of it as the more like pitiful, like, oh my goodness, when it comes to the end of humanity, it's not this thing that was this big hoorah, maybe not even big explosions. It's just something that bit off and, so to speak, right? Or just rotted the spirit of people until, you have just this pitiful reality. And I think John Murphy did an incredible job of getting that to me. Again, we started with the James Baldwin when we're talking about reaction to music is usually our own shit, our own baggage, and not what the composer. Well, I mean, having come in blind to this movie and not, personally being afraid of a zombie apocalypse, how do I have that baggage? So I feel like in listening to the music and watching the film, I really got a chance to hear what John Murphy was trying to say. So shout out to John Murphy. I want to listen to a little bit more here of In the House in a Heartbeat, the theme from 28 Days Later. I always come to you when it comes to music, media, movies, art that are based in England or Ireland or somewhere. So you're the correspondent. You're the Western European correspondent.
The man on the street.
What do you think of this one? Because this is one of those London films, right? Or it starts there anyway.
Yeah, I enjoyed it a lot. I liked it quite a bit, and this music for me kind of reflects that desperation and how it opens up with things being, really spread out and sparse. It reminds me of when they were trying to move around. Yeah. And they get to that tower block where I think it's Donald Gleason, the name of the actor, the father and the daughter, with all the shopping trolleys at the base. Yeah. That reminds me of the intensity of getting there. The music really does paint sort of an apocalyptic picture.
And the score, if you go and buy the soundtrack, it's that and like maybe two other cues between the two movies, but it's used over and over again, even over both movies. And it's not even old sound, or it doesn't sound too repetitive, when you hear that theme. It fits so well into the puzzle of the art that was created. It's really incredible.
It's a puzzle piece. That's good.
Yeah. But before I let you get to your second ending, my weekly thing, it starts off with the piano. We have strings. Sure, there's an electric guitar plugged up, but listen, that has the ingredients of any of these other classical recordings that we platform on in our classical spaces. So why can that not be just a part of what we think of when we program and when we talk about classical music, so-called classical music, especially from an American perspective, and then certainly for this time of year? I know a lot of folks love, especially in radio, love to program for Halloween. That's when you can get some of the fun stuff that you can't play in February, or you can't play Night on Bald Mountain on Martin Luther King Day, But it is, but over the mountaintop, you could read the mountaintop speech and how scary, anyway, I'm giving up too much juice to y'all because that's how I would spend that. But anyway, we repeat it over and over again. But I mean, surely you could make a case for that piece of music in the right setting in a classical space, and moreover, even affirm it as something that is classical.
Could you imagine getting into your car about 10, 11 o'clock at night And
shoot, 8 a.m. You hear that going to work.
But what I'm saying is, like, if you turn on your car and you start driving and it's like in progress,
Sure,
like you just missed the intro, that would creep your ass out, wouldn't it?
It would be a reaction, though, right? Right.
I would be looking like,
that would be
what
a real
movie
engagement.
did I just jump into?
Anyway, John Murphy. Go listen to that track from 28 Days Later if you haven't, and you're feeling in a spooky mood. If you're feeling like you're in the season of it all. Anyway, what you got this week?
Nothing spooky for me. I'm sticking with the Indigenous tip here. I started to get into music by Louis W. Ballard, who, if you do a little bit of research online with him, the broad strokes is he's known as the father of Native American composition, and I'm guessing where that moniker comes from is an indigenous person composing in a
Western way,
like a conservatory sort of
right,
educated sort of thing. However, if you look at the listing of some of his compositions, all of them are songs that deal with some aspect of indigenous life. You've got things like Navajo corn grinding song, the Taoist round dance song, Dakota love dance song. So yes, there's some Western sensibilities as far as the orchestration and everything, but the stories and the ideas are indigenous American. And the piece that the set that I got into was the Cochina dances. And when we were listening to this before we turned on the microphones, you said that this is technique heavy. But I hear them, and yes, the technique is there, but a cochina is a doll that they would give to kids, not only just to play with and to pass the time and everything, but they were decorated in a way that they could be used to tell the stories of their folklore and their history. So I can hear each doll's little dance to it, you know. And the one that I landed on, I actually heard a version of this with piano and cello and one with piano and bassoon. And for me, the piano and bassoon hit better than the one with the cello did.
Period.
No shade. No shade. They're both great performances, but sonorously, this one was more pleasing.
Sure.
This is from the Kachina Dances. It's movement 4 called Bees. Now you see, with something like Flight of the Bumblebee, it's going up and down and up and down because bumblebees are they're kind of crazy flyers,
right?
They don't have the best control over their directions. With the bees, I can hear them totally dive bombing my head and getting aggressive.
Yeah.
This tells a story.
First of all, shout out to Jacqueline Wilson on bassoon. I've been in collaboration with Jacqueline Wilson on some panel or something. I think maybe for International Double Reed Society, but incredible musician and some incredible technique there. You described, you said I described it as a technical piece, and it very much is that, but that's nothing to sleep on. I think heavens no. I think a lot, especially when I do master classes, that there are so many students who come up focusing on the technical playing that they don't know how to play a phrase or they don't know how to really sing something. So that is definitely something I lean heavy in. I always make sure that certainly bassoon students are thinking about more lyrical music,
right,
as opposed to just the technical. So I really wanted to make sure I said that. But with all of that being said, the technique is clean here, and the technique is phenomenal. Huge shout out to Jacqueline Wilson. That's an incredible piece of music. You know my Western classical taste, so that's my bag.
Yeah,
like that is definitely my bag. And I'm gonna have to I'm gonna have to buy that if this piece by Lewis Ballard is just at a publisher or something, after we cut off the mics, I'm gonna go support an indigenous composer, because I wanna take a look at that too. My technique probably isn't as good as Jacqueline's though. Yeah. And shout out to the pianist. The pianist isn't named here, but if y'all let me know who it was, I'll give her a shout out next week.
Lewis Ballard, born in Oklahoma, 1931, died in Santa Fe, 2007. So rest in power to Lewis Ballard.
Yeah, that's a nice find there. So happy Indigenous Peoples Day, everyone. We'll return to that topic a little bit in the fourth movement. But as we get to the third movement, I wanted to introduce and shout out Daniel Kumapayi. So Daniel is a musician who has an organization called Àkójọpọ. So Daniel Kumapayi is of Nigerian heritage, born in Nigeria, and speaks to the issue of money, when it comes to musical training in Nigeria. And it's not just having the money to play for to have a private music teacher or those sorts of things. It gets all the way down to the issue of shipping music, because as you can imagine, it costs a lot of money to ship a box full of books to Lagos. What would that cost be, and how much time would it take?
I can't imagine.
So Àkójọpọ is an organization that raises money toward funding things like that, so that folks in Nigeria can really experience what they want to in their country and in their own way. I'll read a little bit of the mission here of Àkójọpọ. It says, Àkójọpọ is inspired by musicians in Nigeria who, despite lacking essential resources, still commit to their artistic disciplines. Our goal is to bring more equity and opportunity to composers and instrumentalists in Nigeria by providing educational programming for an enriching learning experience, hosting concert series to bring awareness to Nigerian composers, and delivering quality and affordable musical instruments and resources to Nigerian instrumentalists. So it's a great cause. I'll have more information in the description of this. Again, Daniel Kumapayi runs the ship over there, so we'll be hearing from him. We talk about this organization, the things that have inspired it, and actually also a little food, a little Nigerian food. But to get us in the conversation, I wanted to make sure I put another Nigerian artist on everyone's radar. So Scott, have you heard of Tiwa Savage? Have you happened to heard of this artist?
Heard it, but I don't know if I could pick it out of a lineup.
Yeah, Tiwa Savage, the first time I heard her music or heard anything about her, it was a collaboration with Beyonce. Tiwa Savage is featured in Black is King. Ever since that feature, even before, but especially after the feature, she's been getting a lot of Western attention, and it's always fun when we think about music that is international, music away from American sensibilities. For me, it's fun to hear Black music, and even Black music that works here in the States. When we talk about Black radio, the Black club, that general hip hop aesthetic, and how it branches off in different ways. So I'm really excited to see more awareness, even on the pop side of things. More of us know the so-called pop side. More of us know the name Fela Sawandi, these days.
Sure.
So the Western classical, but I think it's also important to affirm the full culture and experience of a country. So to all of that, we're going to listen to a little bit of Tiwa Savage's Koroba. Koroba, in an interview I read, she was featured on National Public Radio, NPR, and to this tune, she was talking about how Koroba basically is a way in this song of talking about taking their fair share back, their fair share of the resources, their fair share of the money, their fair share of the culture, from folks who have it locked up. And, I think that's a great way to, for me to think about the work of Àkójọpọ, really inspiring folks here in the States to empower folks over there in Nigeria to really live their full artistic lives. So here's a little bit of Koroba by Tiwa Savage, and here's my conversation with Daniel Kumapayi.
Yeah, I was born in Lagos, Nigeria, and I moved here when I was 5. Most of the time, I don't think most people recognize that I am Nigerian, just probably because I don't sound Nigerian. My parents, though, if you hear them, they usually speak Yoruba at home. I grew up eating like fufu. I don't.
Okay.
We didn't grow up eating too many American dishes. I think it's because I went to a predominantly white school that we had. My dad doesn't really like to eat too much American food. He likes his amala and goosey soup. So
Okay.
he's a pretty traditional person. But I think for me, my ties are just as I was in Michigan being a music education major, I just kind of kept thinking, what does music education look like in Nigeria? And as I started to do more, findings, I was like, wow, there's not a lot of resources for people who are either instrumentalists or who want to be music educators. So that's where Àkójọpọ kind of came up.
Okay, yeah, and we're definitely going to talk about that. But I'm just a little curious. Did you grow up in sort of a cross-cultural household? Were you speaking Yoruba growing up? What was that like for you?
No, my parents speak both English and Yoruba, but I think for the most part, they wanted us to really assimilate in the U.S. I know some parents may teach their kids Yoruba, but for them, I think it was like an assimilation. Because I know for my dad, sometimes he's a pharmacist, sometimes he's working, and it's hard for people to understand him. And I think coming to the U.S., they really wanted to give us as much opportunity, and I think they felt like their language barrier kind of prevented from that sometimes.
I see.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting because the sort of assimilation that you're speaking to just reminds me of the differences in Black experiences here in the United States. We've gotten really comfortable post murder of George Floyd and talking about race and all of our DEI initiatives and music. So, I mean, basically what I hear you're saying is that although your cultural ancestry is a little different, your experience is basically the same as a Black American born person.
Yeah, and it's actually interesting because I grew up in a predominantly white. I went to predominantly white school from fourth grade until until I went to college. When I first came to the U.S., I lived in D.C. and I'll say my school setting was diverse then. But when I came to U of M, it was interesting because I felt like I met some people who I think every once in a while you've heard oh, this person talks like a white person, even though they're Black. So it's interesting because when I came to U of M, I realized there are things within the Black community that I don't think I am well aware of or I have as much experience with. Because when I think about my upbringing, it was really within my Nigerian household. And then I interacted mostly with white people. And then every once in a while we had another Black person. But when I came to U of M, it was so cool. We had an African Student Association, a Black student union. I was like, oh my gosh, it was kind of cool.
Yeah, it seems to be the experience for a lot of Black musicians to have grown up in predominantly white spaces. But I'm glad to hear that you were really excited about the more colorful side of education and music as you were going along.
Yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit about your entry into music. I know Access is something that you're trying to create for folks in Nigeria, but why don't you talk a little bit about your entry point into Western classical music? What did that look like for you?
I think for me, I just went to a school that just had options. I think some schools don't have that. I went to a middle school that had a band teacher, a choir teacher, and an orchestra teacher. So when they came in and they had this instrument zoo and they were asking, hey, what are you interested in doing? Right off the bat, I had 3 different options. And within those options, I had different instruments I could sing. So I actually did choir for a little bit, but then I was like, man, I don't like this. And then I did band, but I was like, I don't like band. And then I just kind of found my way in orchestra. And I think I played bass just because they needed a bass player. And my parents did not want to pay to rent an instrument. So the bass was the only free one. So if my parents wanted to rent an instrument, I probably would be playing cello right now.
Sure.
But
yeah.
I just played bass because I didn't have to rent. And then I think I took the bass home to start practicing in 7th grade. I was really cool with the bus driver because her son played violin in our class. So she let me actually put the bass inside the school bus. And that was the first time I got to practice.
Wow. Yeah, I guess that is a plus, being able to get in good with the bus driver when you play an instrument that big. That story is one I've heard a lot too. Even for myself, I play the bassoon because that was an instrument that my parents didn't have to go out and buy or go out and rent, and it worked out. But I think it's interesting how that sort of is a common thread among many musicians. What do your parents think about your bass playing, your music teaching now? Have they come along?
I think they have. I remember when I first was applying to school, they didn't have really any interest in me, like, doing music. Because again, my dad's a pharmacist and my mom's a nurse, and I think for Nigerian immigrants, they have very like high expectations. And not that music isn't a high expectation, but it isn't a norm. Sure. So I know when I was applying, there was a lack of support initially, but I think I really got them to get along. But I think one thing that helped out was I got a scholarship from U of M, which helped out with tuition, because I know for my parents, they're like, why am I gonna, go into debt for this man to play a double? So, right.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about Àkójọpọ. So first of all, when I think about classical music, Western classical music, and spreading it to more people, spreading it to more kids, I can't help but to think about the idea of colonization. The idea that, when I started my musical journey, I wasn't learning about Black musicians. I was learning about Beethoven and Brahms and all those folks. I feel like, from my perspective, that conversation would be really expanded when we're talking about providing access to European music in the non-European setting of Nigeria. So basically, why do you have this goal and this mission? Why is it so important to you to make sure folks in Nigeria have access to this music?
Yeah, so for me, that was something. Actually, what was that book? I read a book. I forgot. It was like El Sistema. Let me see if I can find the name of the book really quickly.
Oh, sure.
I believe it's El Sistema Orchestrating Venezuela's Youth. Because when I first started Àkójọpọ, I was thinking, oh my God, I'm a colonizer. Like, I'm trying to spread the white man. And when I was reading this book, it really talked a lot about how within the Venezuelan Youth Orchestra, like the El Sistema program, like, I think for the most part, the public, it's had some successes. But I think kind of like, the bad side or the dark side is, it was kind of pushing just for the exposure of just to play, classical works. Like, it wasn't as if we were trying to push for, Venezuelan music. It just felt like more so, okay, we're trying to go on tour, play in these big halls for these white audiences and play this European repertoire. But for me, when I started Àkójọpọ, I was thinking, is there even interest for classical music? Because at first I thought there wasn't. But then when I look in, like, history-wise, there are African composers such as like Ayo Bankole or Akin Uba. And these are people who were born even before my time. So the fact that there are these composers or organists or musicologists that existed in Nigeria, I'm like, wow. Because I never knew about them. So my focus is not like, I don't want anyone to be like, you're learning this instrument to go play Mozart. I don't care about that. Because I think what's cool about music is like, people appreciate it when you're different. So if you want to play bassoon or if you want to play violin, that's not my concern, but I just want you to have the resource to do whatever you want. So I know a lot of times, like, there are some Nigerian works that people have never heard of because they're just not as accessible. For example, like if a composer in Nigeria wants to compose a piece that, embraces their culture, it's very hard because for us, if you need to commission a piece, you can maybe get some sponsorships, some grants to help out. But if a composer in Nigeria, that's expensive, you got to maybe pay performers, you got to have a space. And some instruments they may not, compose for because they don't have the time to learn about it or know someone who they can see how they play it and create this feedback loop. So it's just like, I don't know. I just feel like if I had the chance to do it, why don't they? And it's not focused on go and play Mozart. It's focused on do what you want to do and do it however you want to do.
Yeah. I like that way of thinking about it. And when you're talking about these Nigerian composers and musicologists that we haven't really heard of, it reminds me of the idea of just teaching folks more about themselves and more about their own culture, maybe parts of it that haven't always been highlighted when it comes to, what we call classical music.
Yeah. And actually, one of our guest sessions, we hosted a guest session like this virtual masterclass for some jazz musicians. So that's an area we've been trying to work on, because some of the jazz musicians, they fill out the feedback form, and they mention how oftentimes, when they're trying to learn jazz, there's not as strong of like an American presence within Africa. So sometimes when people are trying to improvise, they don't have a lot of resources in terms of like teachers or people who really have that experience with that jazz language. So that's some areas we're trying to improve on in our future programming as well.
Yeah, you reminded me of the meaning of the word Àkójọpọ. I understand that it means harmony, but there must be a deeper meaning than just, thirds and fifths and harmony as we tend to think about it, right?
Yeah. So I knew I wanted the name to have some kind of musical reference. And for me, when I just think about harmony, I just, I think of happiness. I think of peace. I think of like everything that I would want. So that was just my interpretation. I think, I don't know, maybe people will have other meanings, but I remember I asked my yoga teacher, like, hey, what's the translation for harmony? And that was the name she gave me. And I was like, I like that name. I like how it looks. So I was like, let's go with that.
Yeah, it's a good name. Looking at the website, I see how much you're focused on creating access points and offering resources to folks in Nigeria. I find that, us in the States here, it's easy for us to take for granted the different issues when we're talking about resources or a lack of resources. I'm sure instruments are a thing, and maybe even books. But I wonder, in doing this work, if you've been reminded of, a lack of resources that we may not always think about. What have you found in trying to create these access points and resources for folks in Nigeria?
Oh, for like resources that people don't have in Nigeria?
Right.
Okay, so for one, music isn't commonly seen within public schools. So most of the people that I've interacted with, they would either learn music through churches or informally. Handel, one of our alumni, he's mostly self-taught. So Handel has kind of had experiences to like be exposed to music either through like virtual opportunities or just like hanging out with other violinists and learning from them. Okay. And then for the most part, he may use YouTube as a resource, but it's interesting how some people learn through not such a structured way, but they learn through exposure to and it's really interesting, like just that self-taught process. Because you would think, okay, if you play guitar, you can maybe learn by yourself. But Anu, she's another violinist in Nigeria. She's mostly self-taught, and she's good, I feel like you hear self-taught and you're like, okay, self-taught, but no, Anu's good. And I'm just like, I feel like if I ever do a PhD, I would really want to understand, what does that look like? Self-taught for like a classical instrument, because I just feel like there's got to be something in there. But some other aspects for like lack of resources, when people need to order instruments, like something like rosin for us, we can get it, really quickly, Amazon. But a lot of, services don't ship to Nigeria. I think due to, again, in the past, you may have heard like the whole Nigerian prince.
Right.
Yeah, so we sometimes have a bad rep. So for example, if someone needs to buy something, people in Nigeria can't use PayPal. So they can't make a PayPal account. If they want to make a GoFundMe, they can't make a GoFundMe. If they want to use Amazon, it's very hard to use. There's not a lot of access. So let's say for us, we can use Amazon and ship it, but for them, they can't. So the only options they have are stores in Nigeria. And sometimes those stores may not order from the best, retail shops. Mm-hmm. So now they have a limited access to things. And knowing that there's limited access to things, those shops may charge, a higher price because they know this is the only place they're going to get it from. And then, it's not accessible for them. We've done some international shipping, but for us, we covered the costs to make it easier for them. But if someone wanted to buy something, internationally, what people often do is maybe buy in bulk. So they'll find other people who are trying to buy, so that way they can lower that shipping cost.
Yeah. So just so that I, make sure that I'm understanding, your organization facilitates this by buying resources, buying supplies, and sending them over, or how does that work? How does the Nigerian violinist get that rosin that they need?
Yeah, so we did a test run recently with just books to kind of like simplify the process. So everyone told us what books they were looking to get, and we got those books. And then we used a service called SGK, which is based in Stafford, Texas. They ship to Nigeria via air freight. So we got the things, we packaged it, we shipped it to Texas. And then from Texas, SGK shipped it to Lagos. And then one of our team members picked it up in their warehouse. And then we just hand delivered because I'm not too familiar. Oh, I guess I don't trust the postal system that well in Nigeria.
Okay.
So I'd rather just have one of our team members just deliver. So
is that lack of trust based on personal experience? Have you made it back to Nigeria many times since you were a kid?
No, I was supposed to go recently before COVID happened. I mean, I was supposed to go before COVID happened, but then COVID happened. But I'm actually going this Christmas and hopefully again in the summer for we're hoping to do a concert in person in the summer. So yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's phenomenal. I'm really fascinated by what you were saying about the means traditionally of learning music. It's not taught in the schools. You learn it in church or just on the streets, just naturally. I wonder, as you're creating access to classical music for folks, if there's any dissonance or if there's a barrier there in sort of teaching the value of music making. This is something that is at the, at least in my experience, was at the core of my educational experience in kindergarten. We had music class, so the value of it all was ingrained in me. Is that a challenge working with musicians who didn't have that same privilege?
For me, I know when we did our virtual mentorship program, we asked everyone specifically what they were trying to work on. So I knew everyone was at different places. So in knowing specifically what they were trying to improve on, we tried to find teachers that would best suit that. So if someone wanted to work on double stops, just because I went to U of M, I kind of knew people in mind who maybe I've seen them perform. And when I think about them, they may always perform pieces that have like a bunch of double stops. Or if someone's trying to work on like legato, I think about musicians who I've seen who tend to play like pieces that are like very maybe romantic or smooth. Or I think about people who I know who maybe have the skills to teach what they're trying to learn.
I see. Yeah, that's really important. Again, back to the idea of, and I'm embarrassed to say the name because I just know I'm butchering it, but that meaning of Àkójọpọ, harmony, even on the deeper level. I wonder what role that traditional Nigerian music must play in your work. It's not strictly the Western classical. I'm sure there's some sort of fusion there, right?
Recently, I'll put this in the chat. So recently for our virtual concert we did, my focus was just showcasing pieces by Nigerian composers. So I'll put in the chat right now and you can check it out later on. But if you watch it, all the pieces that we featured were by Nigerian composers in Nigeria, and all the performers except for one who had a special relationship with the composer in Nigeria were also from Nigeria. So all the pieces you would listen to, they're a mixture of some classical instruments, but also if you look at the last piece by Johnson, his piece uses the djembe, a singer, piano, and cello.
Okay.
So that kind of implements like this African mix. And some of them are piano and vocal works entirely in Yoruba. So yeah, that's kind of our focus.
Yeah.
It wasn't like I was directing that. I was like, hey, what pieces do you have from your culture that you want to share? So
Yeah, I'll be sure to include that link for everyone to see. I'm curious about audiences now. You talk about this musical fusion. Are there have you seen this work well received by non-musicians in Nigeria? Is there an audience for this music?
I think so. So I can kind of share, like we've been doing our fundraiser, and like at first I was like, okay, this is nonprofit. This is going to be very tricky. And our fundraiser hadn't been going as good as I thought. But recently we had a donation from someone in Nigeria, and they donated about, I think, like 100,000 naira, which when you convert it to US dollar, it's about $200. And we were really thankful because when we asked them, how did they find out about Àkójọpọ, someone who was in the concert shared it, and they were not a musician. They were just a Nigerian who were an arts lover. They're in like the field of accounting. And that was insane because that was our first donor in Nigeria ever. So I do think there is an interest for musicians who for people who aren't musicians. I think you just need to be a lover of the arts, a lover of music. So
Yeah, yeah. I wonder about, you mentioned funding, and I really appreciate how transparent you are on the website about, the funding and where different funds are spent and that sort of thing. Are there challenges, that we don't typically think about in working internationally? Can a person just go to the website and make a donation, or are there other steps that they have to go through, or other considerations that we should be thinking about?
Yeah, so I'll say the biggest factor in like working in Nigeria, for example, when we look at grants a lot of the grants that we try and find, they're typically not tailored towards what we're trying to do. Most of the grants we find, maybe in Nigeria, are focused more on like agriculture, health, education that's maybe not music related.
Yeah.
But wait, oh my gosh, I just went blank. What was your question again?
Oh, yeah, no worries. Like the money challenges and working internationally.
Yeah, so one challenge that we have is oftentimes when we ask for donations, for me, I think it would be so good if at least some of our donor base is from Nigeria, because I feel like that's the community we're trying to represent.
Yeah.
But I also understand that Nigeria has, there's poverty within the country, but there's also like it's so tricky because like there is a lower class, but there's also an upper class, and the middle class is slowly starting to like thin away. I feel like sometimes you meet people who, they've lived a life where they don't have a lot of resources, and sometimes you meet people who've had all the resources they want. So for us, when we ask for donations, I'm sincerely asking people both in US and Nigeria. And I'm not expecting that people in Nigeria, will like for example, if you are in a financial burden, I'm not expecting you to donate, but I want to just give you that option. I don't want to assume that all of our donors are just going to be like rich white people. I want to, even if someone is in Nigeria, I want to just give them the opportunity and the access to donate if they choose to, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I just think it'd be it'll just look bad if we're trying to support Nigerians, but we don't think they have the money to donate. So why even give them that choice? So
yeah, I understand that. But what do you say to the person, even the American person, who comes up to you and says, well, I can donate toward creating musical access for Nigerians, or I can provide funding to people who need food? How do you, how do you engage that concern?
Yeah, and that's a valid concern. I remember when I started Àkójọpọ, well, one of our team members asked, why are you doing music? There's so many other issues going on in Nigeria. But for me, I just feel like, okay, when I look at myself, okay, I'm Nigerian, I'm a musician. Like if I wanted to build some kind of health clinic, I'm not the person. I don't have the skills, I don't have the resource, I don't have the connection. But when I think about what I do have, I'm a music educator, and you also have to do something you're passionate about, you have to do something very passionate about. And when I see other Nigerian musicians trying to do what we do, I get really excited. And it's not like I don't get excited about helping feed people, but I just don't think I have as much connections and resources to do that. But when it comes to music, I just think when we ask donors, I just ask them, do you have a passion for the arts, outside of the US? Or do you like music from other cultures? And I just try and tell the story of Àkójọpọ from other people's experiences. And, fingers crossed. Again, it's not like I'm asking you not to donate to things related to food. Please do. But, there are other aspects to Nigeria, not everyone's in poverty. There are other people doing other fields. So I just kind of want to bring light to that.
Sure. Yeah. And I'm sorry that, the conversation always seems to come back to money, but that's just one of the realities we live in. I wonder, again, if you could sort of speak to funding issues when it comes to this work. I guess right now what I'm thinking of specifically are different American grants. So if there's a grant out there to help, I don't know, marginalized youth or at-risk youth or whatever, do you find that you're eligible for those grants? Are there pathways, in the traditional funding spaces for what you're doing?
There are. I know I applied for Echoing Green, but I didn't get accepted. That was one avenue. And we looked at some of the grants that they did share. But when we looked at the past people who were funded, especially in Africa, it was always something related to agriculture or something poverty related, which is great. I'm glad they're doing that kind of work. But right now, when we're looking at some things that we could do for fundraising, I think we're leaning towards like corporate sponsorships and trying to find, people who run businesses who are willing to support us. But if anyone knows any grants that they're like, hey, you should apply for this, please let us know. But we haven't had, too much successes with grants right now.
Yeah, I think that's a story for a lot of people. Unfortunately, they can either be so specific or so vague to where you don't know if you really fit in. But it sounds like there are some pathways. I did see on your website that there are some considerable donations and some considerable outcomes of those donations.
Yeah, and right now we're trying to apply as a 501c3, and we can use a 1023 easy form. Mm-hmm. We don't anticipate we'll be making. I think it's more than 30,000. No, I think it's either 30,000 or 50,000 in the next 3 or 5 years.
Okay.
So that will alleviate the cost of filing and also speed up the process. But through that, then we could apply for some corporate sponsorships.
Yeah, all these rules that you have to learn and memorize when you as you move forward. So what's the big goal when the work of your organization is done? What will the musical ecosystem in Nigeria look like?
For me, wow, if we lived in an ideal world, I think it would be so cool if because right now there are a lot of Nigerians who live abroad because either, there's just more resources abroad. I think simply they can advance in their careers more. But I just think, when we think about teachers or stuff, it would be cool if those people could either, visit, or there could be a reoccurring program in which, Nigerians are teaching Nigerians, because there are people who are qualified, but they're abroad, and they may come back every once in a while. They may not come back because of financial issues, but it would be really cool if the ecosystem was just Nigerians teaching Nigerians, but all we did was just provide resources. So if someone needs help with getting a quality instrument or a teacher, we just provide aid with that. Or if someone needs help with, maybe they got into a school and for example, if you get into a school abroad, it's very tricky if you're Nigerian, because let's say you get into a school in the UK or US, the Naira currency doesn't work well. So coming to the US is really expensive because your currency doesn't, work well. So I imagine just living, to some aspect could be more difficult than someone who maybe came from China and Europe, because their currency has more equivalency. But I think our end goal is just to provide just more resources. It would be cool if we had a school in Lagos where we brought in teachers who are maybe abroad or teachers in Nigeria, and we just taught, music. It would be so great if music was in public schools, but man, I don't want to get involved with the government.
Well, with politics, yeah.
Yeah, that would be great if music was available. If music was available.
Yeah, I understand what you're speaking to when you talk about more resources abroad. When I think about the intersection of Western classical music in Nigeria, the first name that comes to mind is Fela Sawandi. But I understand that he cultivated a career in England and then went on to Canada, and that's how that was able to happen. But I wonder if there are any other names, maybe a composer or some music that you can put folks onto for we Westerners to broaden our own perspective on what's happening in Nigeria music wise.
Oh, there's let me see. I'm just gonna plug our concert. I'm gonna plug our concert because the theme was past, present, and future. So the first two pieces that you would hear, let me see. The first two pieces that you would, so the first piece is Akin Uba's 6 Yoruba songs, and that's from the past. And the next one is Yoruba Trifecta from Dr. Ariola Warranty. He lives in the US. That's from the present. He's alive. Very well alive. And then if we keep going, we have Fred O and his piece, the two violin songs. He's very much alive. And then we keep going, and then we have people who I kind of said were the future. They're people maybe around our age. But I will plug our concert too.
Yeah, definitely. I'll make sure that we hear some of that to transition out of this interview. Before I ask you the last question I have for you, how can folks learn more about Àkójọpọ, donate, and offer up whatever resources they can toward your goal?
I would say let me plug. the on Instagram we are at Àkójọpọ MF, and then Facebook. Let me put our link. I would say just follow, follow, and we will try and communicate everything. Like right now, I'll kind of like our fundraising goal is, we're trying to raise $7,500. We only raised $500. So our goal is for the rest of this year is to figure out if we can raise as much as possible to complete our 2022 programming. So I know my birthday is coming up on September 28th. So I was gonna, make a little birthday campaign.
Yeah, sure.
The goal of like $500. So I'll probably post that on the social media. But after that, I'm running the Ann Arbor Marathon in October. I'm hoping to raise some money through running that marathon. After that, Giving Tuesday, November. And then after that, our goal is to come up with some kind of holiday campaign. But hopefully through those 4 initiatives, we can get closer to our goal amount.
Yeah, well, we'll make sure everyone follows to make sure that we keep up with all of these campaigns that you have. So, my last question for you, as I was learning about you, reading about you, I appreciated that you made a point to mention Nigerian food in your bio, and that's kind of where we started today. So to tie it back around, I wonder, what Black Americans or any Americans should be looking for if we really want to get a taste of Nigeria. Are there dishes that you recommend? What do we need to go look for?
I think a good dish to start off, like a safe dish that most people like, is jollof rice. That's a pretty entry level.
Okay.
I would say medium level is let me think. Medium level is, I'll probably say medium level is like rice and stew with some goat meat. That's okay. Medium. And if you try and get real OG baba old, I don't know, the old generation, I'll say get some amala. I don't even eat that. That's the kind of food my dad and his friends eat when they're hanging. I don't know what stew. I think it's a voodoo. I'm not in a voodoo stew. I don't like it, but that's some advanced Nigerian repertoire. I don't. But jollof rice is beginner. I'll say rice and stew and goat meat. That's medium, and then amala. That's not even for me.
If I find myself at a Nigerian restaurant, I'm gonna jump in the deep end and see if I can't find some amala.
I don't. I feel like if you eat amala, you age 50 years.
Really?
I don't know. I'm sure maybe young Nigerians eat it, but I just feel like it's an old people kind of food. It's for the 60, 70 euros. I don't be eating those.
I gotcha. Well, to bridging cultures, food wise and music wise, Daniel, thank you so much for talking with me today.
Oh, thank you so much, Garrett. Thank you so much again. I'm gonna go make dinner now. So.
I think that's fun. A bright piece of music, a fresh piece of music.
It's cheery.
Yeah, that one's called Trifecta Yorubana, a piece of music by Dr. Ayo Oluranti, a part of Àkójọpọ's virtual concert from 2021, August of 2021. I'll have a link to that. A really great hour's worth of music that, comes from a place that we don't always think about when we think about Western classical music, and a concert put on for a really, really, really great cause. So I want to thank Daniel Kumapayi for coming on Triloquy. Let's rally around this. Let's all find let's all find $5. You were talking about at your job, it's pledge drive season, so you've inspired me. Let's put $5 toward making more of this music possible for folks over there in Nigeria. I'll have links in the description of this. Really, really incredible for me to learn about this and be able to feature this on Triloquy. As we ended a little there, my conversation with Daniel talking about some Nigerian food, and I'm not sure if there are any Nigerian restaurants here in the Twin Cities, but when we're talking about the motherland, there are lots of Somali restaurants. That's sort of a thing. Have you ever eaten any of this East African food that's here in the Twin Cities?
Yeah, there was a time when my friend Scott Working, shout out Scott Working, was in town, and he went with me and my girlfriend at the time, shout out to Lynn. We wanted to go and find a place where we could sit and have injera and goat and some lentils, and I love being able to just use the bread on the tray as the vessel to scoop all of this into my mouth.
Yeah.
But they didn't have that at this place.
Okay. Oh, so you had a plan.
Right. So we show up at this place about 6:00 and there's nobody around. And it's a huge venue, and it's all done up like they're waiting for a wedding reception or something like that. And it's the three of us with all of these chafing dishes full of food. And for some reason, I grabbed like a lamb leg. It's like this huge leg of something. And
they're like, that lamb was for everyone.
And just as I couldn't get anywhere close to eating the whole thing, but I've touched it, so I have to take it.
Yeah.
And I can remember sitting there and looking over at Scott and saying, how much food do you think they have to sell to cover the nut on this place? How much do you think? Because there was nobody around.
Yeah.
So we pay up, leave, go have a couple pints. And by the time we come out, the sun had gone down and it was Ramadan.
Oh, so it was packed after sundown.
It was jumping.
I hope y'all didn't have folks. Well, I mean, I guess you're not supposed to eat before sundown, but they can prepare the food before sundown.
Well, yeah, and we were white people. They didn't think that we were celebrating Ramadan, so they sold it to us, like, hey, great.
They're like, fine, give the lamb to those heathens over there eating with the sun up.
Right.
I need to experience some of that. The world's basically open now, so we have access to that sort of thing here. I need to jump on it. All right, well, to get us into the fourth movement, we've been listening to some trills, some actual musical trills to get us into the Triloquy movement. So the piece of music that I premiered by Marcus Norris in Chicago this past weekend is called "Miss Me." The program notes, I really love the subtext. It's "Miss me when I'm gone, miss me with the bullshit, miss me now you gotta kiss me." So it's like different, a play on those words and everything, and all of the shade therein, I would say, but it starts with in the bassoon part some really cool trills, and someone in the audience took a little cell phone video of the performance, so we're going to listen to a little of my bassoon trilling here to get us into the fourth movement. Again, "Miss Me," an excerpt of it here by Marcus Norris. And shout out to John Batoy on the piano there, assisting at the piano. Again, it's always just so incredible to be in community with Black folk playing Black music, the music of a young Black composer. And there's no respectability. What did we have on? What we wanted to wear. I was in there on this with this floral thing. So just these liberated experiences and performances, they fill me back up. This was actually my first solo performance officially, I think before I moved here to Minnesota in a few years.
So 3 years, huh?
Yeah, I was really honored to have been invited by Adrian Dunn, and it's got me looking forward to this concerto I got coming up at the end of the month.
And did the airline treat you right with your carry-on bassoon?
I had to force my way through, but the bassoonists and instrumentalists in general know that we have to argue with the flight people sometimes. So, all right. Well, we are here in the fourth movement again. We gotta get trill. We gotta get trill here. So, how about you take it away? You actually had some issues to share.
On Saturday night, I left work at midnight, and I started heading in one direction, and cop cars were heading in the complete opposite direction. There was a shooting, not just a shooting, there was a shootout at a bar called Truck Park Bar on West 7th in downtown St. Paul. One woman died, 14 people injured. And this morning on CNN, I heard our mayor commenting to the anchor on CNN for the, I caught the last end of the interview, and something stuck out. He said, "This is unusual. We are not used to this." Something to that effect. He went on for a little bit about this was a tragic event that we just don't see. Mr. Mayor, I would like to invite you to my house on the east side some evening. We'll have a couple beers. Trust me, they're good. But we can sit out and we can count the number of shots fired that we hear, the number of cars racing at 75, 80 miles an hour up and down the residential street next to my house. We can listen to people doing Brodies in intersections. It is on the east side every night, Mr. Mayor.
And it's on the east side every night.
To this day! To this day.
They do a little bit of shooting over here on the west side. I know not everyone is here is from St. Paul or familiar with St. Paul, but it's one, I think, historically speaking, when we talk about the mayor, the black mayor here whose family is from here, there have been a lot of people who've talked to me about the specific black neighborhoods that they grew up in and how the perspective of being, in a more affluent and yes, predominantly black part of town, but very solidly middle class black part of town can really alter one's perspective on what's really going on. And I don't know the race of the people who were over there shooting. I didn't even hear about the thing. That's how, in my own world I am. It's Dell who told me, did you hear about this thing? But, it's something that this happened, prayers to the family and everyone involved. I was prepared to come in here and talk about the shooting at the school down in Texas that has happened last week. But, not to diminish any of these incidents, these are all tragedies. But as we're seeing, and again, it's not news, it's not new news anymore, but guns are gonna gun. And it's becoming easier and easier to just go get one in more parts of the country. Down there in Texas, all you need, and I learned this, it's official, all you need is a Texas ID and to be 21 and up, and you can go and buy you an assault rifle or whatever you need. And here we are with shootouts, folks. You can't even go out to the bar on a Saturday night. Can't even go have a drink because they out here shooting. And I want to make sure that I'm very clear. I want to make, I'm not playing the, somebody's from the hood or this happens here, that's on the east side, that's on the west side. I feel like this is something that's going on everywhere. On the Grand Avenue corridor, again, for folks who don't live in St. Paul, that's one of the older money neighborhoods. The mayor's mansion is over there, and they shoot over there sometime. So I don't think this is at all an issue of, and someone died over there, as a matter of fact, at the bar over there. But I don't think this is an issue of good neighborhood or bad neighborhood when it comes to the actual crime happening, the actual shooting, murder, violence happening. I think maybe perspective as far as where people grew up or where they're from, where they live is one thing, but the actual violence is happening everywhere, not only in every part, different neighborhoods, here in Minnesota, the Twin Cities, but across the country. And we have to, maybe it's too late. Again, I'm thinking about right now that, again, the music I brought in from 28 Days Later, just that pitiful ending. We're just getting to the fact where we're just going to kill each other. We're just going to shoot each other down. It's hard for me to think about what I'm going to shoot somebody over. What am I going to shoot them for? That's always the question I ask myself when it's time for me to think about getting a gun permit or going to the range or whatever. I don't really know what is worth me shooting somebody. I mean, as much as I would never want to just hand somebody my bassoon or something who's trying to rob me, I mean, that's the most valuable thing to me that I can think of. I'm not sure if I'm gonna shoot for that or take a life for that, but I don't.
Same.
Or maybe I need to get over it in this new world we're living in where we have shootouts.
No, I have the same thing. I have the same hesitations and reservations. And I also don't mean to say that my end of town is any worse than any other, because like you said, there are places where people are living that have money and people are getting shot there too.
Right.
But I speak from my perspective of the East Side, and I still love the East Side. You know, it is still my home, and I don't know what I'm saying about it other than, you know, Mr. Mayor, that was not 100% a genuine comment that you made on national
And to
news.
be clear, the shooting that made national news, it happened downtown that's not, that part of Seventh Street is not the hood.
Gentrified.
Yeah, that's totally gentrified. I can't afford to live over there in those condos and apartments.
No.
So again, this is not, it's those folks over there in the hood shooting each other. No, we need to continue to revisit this gun conversation, because this is what's going to happen. Guns will gun. The whole argument of, guns don't kill people, people kill people. Look,
The gun helps.
but I sigh, because what is there left to say? What number of people need to die for us to do something? Now we can shift that over to COVID. Aren't we up to 700,000 people here in the United States?
Mm-hmm.
If we aren't there, I haven't been watching the cable news, but if we aren't there, I'm sure we're close. And that's still not enough for people to, put on a mask or to, do whatever, get the vaccine, do whatever you have to do to mitigate the spread of this thing. That's not enough. So maybe we won't see enough death from gun violence to revisit that conversation. I'm not trying to tell people to get a gun or not to get a gun. I think the pro or anti-gun conversation is relatively irrelevant when you just look at the fact that there's just unnecessary violence that's going on by way of gunfire and gun violence. So stay safe out there, everyone, because folks are not right. Folks' mentals are not right. Still coming out of quarantine. Folks are desperate. We're getting into the holiday season. It's a mess out here. So do what you got to do to keep comfortable. What I do to keep comfortable is to stay in this house of mine.
I like my house.
Stay at home.
Yep.
Quickly, I've been giving Chicago a lot of flowers. Because I had a great time, great food. I don't think I talked about the Chicago pizza. It was a lot. I could only eat one slice, but I waited my 45 minutes and got my deep dish. How you're supposed to. I got it from Geno's East. I don't know how touristy or not that is, but it wasn't so crowded in there. So that's what made me feel good. But Illinois dispensaries are bullshit.
Say more.
It's like a 32 or 34% tax on all cannabis products. But then it's not like when you go to Colorado, you can just go in and see what they got and, shop around or whatever. You have to just type in what you want based on on an iPad or something, and then you're let into the room, and it's cash only. So you gotta, bring your debit card and do all that. It seems like all of these steps, and this isn't just based on my trip to Chicago. When I was visiting my sister in St. Louis a couple months back, she technically she lives in O'Fallon, Illinois, where the military base is. So I bought some cannabis over there. So I've had the cannabis buying dispensary experience in Illinois in 2 different places, and it's just too expensive. It's too locked up. You need to get it from the streets. And when I think about my experience, I'm thinking about somebody at the top making all of this money, and we are completely erasing folks who will never have the ability to open up those shops and follow all those rules. So I mean, listen, my quick advice to all of the cannabis users: if you go to Illinois, see if you can find someone that can hook you up on the street, because the dispensaries don't deserve your money. Not for the prices that they're doing it. I'm not just saying, it's just too expensive, but all those taxes, you'll end up paying $100 for, something that isn't really worth it in any other state, in any other place. I just don't like the way that they have, just shifted cannabis in that way. This is a medicine that's supposed to help us, and we're beginning to commodify it in a way that's just bullshit. By the time I'm an old man and you can just buy your joint at Walgreens, it's not even gonna be like like what we use to,
I wonder.
to help us or to, to recreation us or whatever. Some of the old hippies, even these days, talk about, oh, the weed at Woodstock, y'all wouldn't even, it was better and da-da-da and blah. And, but, yeah, and then to that, I guess while we're on this little conversation, I've heard that they have confirmed fentanyl being sprayed on some of this weed, and the fentanyl is killing people. So, as in the same way I was saying, stay safe about right. In the same way I was saying, stay safe about these guns. If you're a cannabis user, stay safe about that. If you see a $150 ounce, think twice, because you never know. Make sure that you trust your people, the folks you're going through. It's something else out here. But I just wanted to name that because that was the one thing about my trip to Chicago that just really just soured me a little bit, the experience of going to a dispensary.
I'd get seedlings.
I got a little pen from them, but I wasn't about to just drop all that money in there for that, because that's inequitable.
I'd get seedlings
and start to grow.
Yep.
I saw on one documentary that spritzing with skim milk is good for flour. So if you're trying to grow, try the skim milk.
All right.
Anyway, last triloquy. Look, Scott. Why are people just dedicated to dying on the hill of Columbus Day? All over my social media, and not my personal feeds, but I'll read a story about Indigenous Peoples Day or something that is being celebrated specifically for this day. And and I know we need to stay out the comment section, but it's an important place to check up on. Over and over and over and over again, you just have people typing, Happy Columbus Day, Happy Columbus Day. Why are you trying to erase history? You can't change history, da-da-da, blah, blah, blah. Why are people just as I said, dedicated to dying on this hill of Columbus Day, no matter how many times we have the conversation, no matter how many of his statues we tear down?
What I think it's over is having to come to grips with the idea of what you grew up with, what you were taught is inaccurate.
Period. And I'm not saying that's not challenging, because we have all had to face that in certain ways, but that is some bullshit. In the same way in kindergarten, they set us around the picnic table and put a fake, what they called Indian headdress on us. And some of them were dressed as pilgrims. And this was the first Thanksgiving, all of these bullshit, inaccurate stories that they taught us about Indigenous people, proves how nefarious the system really is, teaching this to children, to children.
Right.
And then B, how we have to question everything we've learned in music, certainly, but across the board.
So if Columbus is bad and you have been taught this coming up, that he's this wonderful explorer pursuing manifest destiny, yada, 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 and people say, no, he committed genocide. He enslaved people in the southern islands, et cetera, et cetera.
Because I don't think he even made it to what they now call the continental United States. I thought it was all Caribbean.
West Indies, yeah, they're down in the Indies.
And thought he died believing he had made it to Asia.
Right. So
that's your king, that's your hero. That's your hero.
And there was no golden spices there to bring back.
Right.
So you got to bring back something. And here was all these, really great people. He said they're great people. But yeah, so the only thing that I can figure is that it somehow makes them feel like they're wrong, like what they've grown up believing is wrong, and maybe by proxy you're a racist or a bigot or a whatever, a genocider.
I think all of the Columbus statues are down. I only laugh, and we don't have to go into the nuances of it all, because I feel like this conversation has been happening over and over again. My first Indigenous Peoples Day as a radio host down in Tennessee, you know how I give it up. So it was 3 hours of not only indigenous music, but Western compositions. There exist, Scott, Western compositions that speak to the arrival of Christopher Columbus as this dangerous thing. So I'm sorry that I'm not remembering the composers now. I'm not going to look it up. But even if you want to stick with sound or include sounds that, your most racist of audience members would call, Indian music or whatever, even if you want to include the more traditional Western European sounds, there are compositions that can speak to that as well, and we just get so lazy and get back into, oh, it's just Columbus Day, woke, politically correct, da da da, blah blah blah. I've said it here before, I'll say it again. The land acknowledgement and the land take back conversation is one that I'm ready to be involved in very, very directly. The music by J25 that you brought in, she was talking about take it back,
land back,
land back. This conversation is not going away, and I think it's really going to develop over the coming years. Again, in the first movement, you were talking about land expansions being made, so some land is being given back. I asked the question, and Scott, you don't have to answer it here, but everyone listening, especially to the homeowners, when the ancestors of the indigenous people whose land you live on come knocking on your door and demand their land back, what will you do and where will you go? Okay. We need to begin to think about how radically we need to change things, and changing Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day is one thing, but there's a lot more coming, and I welcome it. I wanted to, also mention before we dismissed, we need to bring the same energy to Thanksgiving. What do you think about that?
All right.
We need to. We need to stop gathering round and having a feast for the genocide of races of people. I mean, I think also, we diminish the idea of indigenous people as one so-called American indigenous people, but these are many different languages, many different traditions, many different musical traditions. When I was talking to Jared Tate on Triloquy, he was talking about how his people musically dealt more with shakers and turtle shells and things. Mm-hmm. And then you have the indigenous traditions that are very reliant on the drum. And then you have Native American flute music and all of that stuff. So all of these different cultures that were intentionally destroyed, and we're having a feast for it. We'll revisit this conversation in a few weeks when it comes so-called Thanksgiving time. But I just wanted to introduce that and encourage people to begin to think about what it means to have a feast day for the destruction of many, many, many millions, countless indigenous people. That's something we need to think about. But Indigenous Peoples Day and acknowledging and celebrating on this day instead of Columbus, I think is a really great start. So I'm off to New York this weekend, so next week I'm gonna bring back
travel
something
safe
from the Met.
Travel safe.
I hope to have good things to say, but we've talked a lot about the Met on this podcast, so it's gonna be a fun week next week for sure. See y'all next week.